Picture having multiple interviews and assurances of a forever job right out of college. And that position is your dream. It's with the biggest company in your field, only to find out after weeks of the process that you were rejected. Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. Today's guest is Mr. Paul Aemisegeo. And he had that exact experience, but he went from being rejected to creating an empire. Join us for a captivating conversation with the visionary founder and CEO of Payroll Mart. With over 2 decades of experience in the payroll and HR industry, Paul has built a thriving business by helping small to mid-sized companies streamline their operations and achieve their goals. In this episode, we delve into Paul's inspiring journey from his early days as an entrepreneur to his current role as a leading expert in the field. Discover how he overcame challenges, seized opportunities, and built a successful company that's making a real impact on businesses all across the country. Discover how to get inappropriate. Welcome to the Inappropriate Growth Podcast. I'm Paul Angelle, your host, and I'm very excited today. I have another Paul, Mr. Paul Aemisegeo. Did I say it right?
Perfect.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
you said it right.
That's tough, man. I'm proud of myself on that one. So, Paul, just so I don't screw this up or so I don't have to do it, why don't you let our listeners or our viewers know where you are, how you got there, and what is it you do?
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Paul. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. I'm physically located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is about 75 miles west of New York City, about 50 miles north of Philadelphia. It's a great little area. My wife and I relocated here about 20 years ago. She was in the biotech pharmaceutical industry, and that brought us from the New York Metro, Connecticut area out to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I am in the payroll, HR, and benefits space. Been doing this for 30 plus years now.
Speaking of that, I know that business a little bit. I know it's a little tough. There's a lot of players. I'm curious about, maybe you had some early struggles. Can you share a memorable early struggle or setback in this whole entrepreneurial journey and how you overcame it?
Sure. I think the biggest blow to my ego was when I got out of college. I played 4 years college sports. At the time, I had an interview with ADP, which is the largest payroll company in the world, basically. I fit all the criteria, college athlete, competitive. They were pretty much hiring anybody that could walk and talk and who was competitive at the time outside of the New York City marketplace. So I felt like I met that criteria. I interviewed with them for 7 hours over the course of 2 days. They brought me back a third time, thought I was hired, and they gave me a blow, said, nope, we're not hiring you. You're a little bit too entrepreneurial for our organization. So at that point, I had, didn't have a job, was pretty dead set on that, working out. So I decided to become a insurance sales agent, broker for Northwestern Mutual. I failed miserably at that. I lasted about 7 months. The good thing about that, though, was I learned a lot about whole life insurance and term insurance, and still is a basis of conversation that I have, today in our conversations with owners and businesses. But that did not work out well for me as an individual life insurance salesperson. So then I found a small startup in the employee benefits space, and it was a great offer. You work for free. We don't pay you a salary, and you have to go out and pretty much, hunt and gather and build the book of business. But instead of calling on employers directly, I had to call on insurance brokers. life insurance brokers. So I had left Northwestern Mutual and I had some contacts. So I went and started there, and that's where, that was the first struggle. And I got knocked down by ADP. I took a job that would pay me nothing, and it worked out well.
I'm all of a sudden very, very interested. I want to hire whoever recruited you for this job where you had to basically cold call all the time for no money. That's
They
amazing.
were master hired, yeah. So the carrot, sort of the incentive, since I was entrepreneurial, the carrot was you build your book of business, you're going to build a recurring revenue stream. It may take you 3 years, but once you build that book of business, you're going to be golden. And that's all I had to hear. Once they told me that, I was in. My first pay, my first commission check was $4.32.
You mentioned that in part of your devastating rejection from ADP, they said you were a bit too entrepreneurial. And then you got into this entrepreneurial space by having to go and sell exactly what you would have had to sell at
Correct.
ADP almost.
Yes.
How
Yes.
did that rejection itself, the actual rejection, because it sounds like it's sticking with you, like you still think about it, but how did it shape your path, right? And what lessons did you learn from that experience that may have helped you in the future?
You know, in the grand scheme of things, anyone listening to us, it's not a, sort of not like this big traumatic situation. But for me at that time, I was pretty confident, had an ego, played sports, competitive. I thought it was a lock. I thought this was a shoo-in sort of job offer. You're going to make good money at the time, move out of the house. And when they said, I think in my gut, I knew it wasn't a good fit for me culturally. And I'm thinking throughout the interview process, I'm knowing myself, I most likely referenced entrepreneurial or made points about eventually owning my own business, or or seeing, something that would probably give them an indication that I was not someone that was going to necessarily follow the rules and just stand in line and listen to what my sales manager would tell me. I'm the type of person, if you tell me something, I'm probably not going to listen to it. I'm probably going to figure out a different way of doing it because I don't like the way that you just told me. And that probably comes from my dad and sort of, my family of, that whole dynamic. But yeah, I think I probably self-sabotaged it. When I look back on it and reflect on the whole interview process, it was probably me that, you know, uh, you know, this didn't I managed not to get myself hired.
What was the
So
inspiration behind starting Payroll Mart, and what unique value proposition did you bring to the market at that time? And what are you bringing now?
I talk to my daughters about this, and I look at my wife's sort of career and, friends and people I mentor, and all the steps, all the stops, and that first book of business that I built, they all set the foundation for Payroll Mart. So Payroll Mart is a combination of basically everything that I've done. And being on the broker side and working with thousands of brokers and employers, their clients, and seeing the struggles and the pains that they deal with day in and day out of having employees, paying those employees, hiring those employees, offboarding them, setting up their benefits, looking at various insurance companies and deciding which company that is going to be best for their employee population, plus the executives, plus the CEO's wife. So looking at all of those sort of experiences, I felt the payroll space, the space that rejected me, basically, right? Where this is where I hired and I wanted to go into originally. I felt that payroll space, there was a gap there in terms of representation and how payroll was distributed and sold by direct sales reps who are biased to their specific company. Also, the fact that these large payroll companies have significantly crossed over into the insurance world and are some of the biggest insurance producers now. I realized that there was an opportunity to give employers an unbiased sort of broker advisory type of sales process that's never been created on the payroll side and HR side. Whereas it's a standard on the insurance side. If you want insurance, whether it's individual life insurance or group insurance, you typically go to a broker or an advisor. You don't go to the insurance company directly. The insurance companies are not necessarily built for in-house direct sales distribution. Payroll is all sold directly by their in-house sales reps. So you're not getting an unbiased experience when you meet with an ADP rep or a Paylocity rep or a Paychex rep. And I feel that the insurance broker, advisor, 401k advisor, they're one of the strongest advisors for their clients. They don't get paid unless they do a good job. They don't stay around unless they continue to do a good job and service the client and show up, day in and day out. Payroll sales rep shows up day one, sells and promises, and then you never see them again. So my mission for Payroll Mart was to combine my experiences and fill that gap of distribution. How is what the employer is experiencing when they want to change their payroll provider or their entire system, right? It's a big decision. And the last person I would want to talk to personally would be a direct sales rep. I'd want to talk to a third party, unbiased, as much as you can be unbiased about a system and or a company. That's who, as a CEO of my company, if I'm making a major vendor change, I'd want to speak to third parties that are going to vouch and or bring credibility and or give me their testimonial on the experience. And that was why I started Payroll Mart.
So you can sell services from multiple companies based on what
Correct.
fits.
100%.
Okay, that
Based,
makes sense.
based on our discovery, right? Our discovery process, finding out the pain points, what exactly is going on. Inevitably, founder starts a company, they're going to go with Paychex or ADP. Maybe now they go with Gusto. There's a lot of other payroll companies coming out of Silicon Valley, a lot of startups, investors, Silicon Valley, they love payroll. For some reason, they're on the payroll bandwagon right now. ADP Paychex still dominating the market. And what happens is you start with ADP, then you move to Paychex. Then where do you go? You've exhausted the two big providers. Now you're like, oh crap, both of those did not serve me well, right? The sales reps promised stuff, they went away. The implementations were horrible experience, and now I have to unbundle it and get out and figure out what do I do with all my historical information? How do I move it? Who's going to do that for me? Right? I have a 401k set up. I have benefits set up. I have everything integrated with that system. How the hell do I get out of it now?
I'm curious, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but what do you think right now are the biggest challenges facing small businesses with today's payroll and HR, I guess, landscape? What's the biggest challenges small businesses have other than the stickiness?
Yeah. So you hit it right on the head. The stickiness is huge, and what we mean by sticky is they engage into a relationship or get into a relationship with a vendor, and they may not be prepared, and or they may have scaled. They may have grown tremendously, or maybe they've reduced their employee size. And what happens is, I'll make this analogy. You've moved, right? You've changed houses. You've bought new houses, and your situation has changed, right? You've either upsized or downsized, right? We all have kind of moved into a new house at some point in our life, right? The first thing that I typically do when I move is I reduce clutter. I get rid of, right, that we throw out stuff. We paint our existing house. Our existing house never has looked any better than it had it, when we were actually living there. Now somebody else is going to come in and move in and buy that house, right? What happens with employers is they make a decision to move or change vendors, and they don't take an inventory of what their current situation is, what their current processes are, what they're going to do with their historical information, how long they have to back that information up, how are they going to get it out of ADP, or how are they going to access it in a year from now when 5 of their employees ask for their W-2s because they never paid their taxes, right? So taking an inventory, heading into the vendor change selection process with having everything organized and packed up and ready to go, and being prepared for that move, and being prepared where things are going to be stored during that move, because that new company may not be able to accommodate everything that you have, or, right, depending on where you are, scaling or downsizing. So the biggest challenge I see is when companies make a move, they decide on a new vendor, they don't they don't, a lot of the implementation execution falls, unfortunately, on the actual employer, who is not prepared or organized to work with that new vendor, because they just don't have the people power or the resources, or they're not organized enough. Because when you make that move, that implementation person is going to say, okay, here's the checklist. Here's the 70 hours of training that you're going to have to do on our new system. Here's all the information you got to get me organized in A, B, C, and D documents, right? So that's why they get stuck. That's why it's so sticky. And what do? They stay where they are. Yeah, and they put up with subpar service or subpar technology, because they're just like, you know what, I don't want to deal with it. The insurance side, that's called premium leakage, which means employees are still on the insurance plans that don't work there.
And they probably don't even know it. Like they're probably not even
They
using
probably don't even know it. And the organization is still paying the premium because the broker doesn't have a lot of transparency or insight into the payroll records. They normally don't see. It's gotten a lot better, as technology improves, but they don't necessarily know when people have been hired or fired until a phone call or email, or now the benefit administration systems are notifying them. But they don't normally have access to the payroll system. So that's one of our other missions, is to bring transparency and insight to the brokers in a secure, safe manner where the employer has authorized it. And that's our other company that we started, is Shuttle, but we can talk about that more later. But
I mean, you mentioned briefly these payroll and HR companies kind of getting into the insurance space, and you talked about your insurance experience. I'm wondering if, and you just showed me a benefit of insurance leakage outside of insurance, the future of payroll. How do you envision the future of payroll and HR, and what trends do you see emerging in the industry that are likely to be the norm in the future?
so there's going to be less paper. Obviously, we're in 2024, and as I said, I've been doing this, 25 plus years, close to 30 years. And there's still a tremendous amount of paper involved when you're dealing with insurance companies and payroll companies, of them talking to each other, right? So, and or onboarding new employees. I literally talk to employers every single day who are physically handing or emailing their new employees a stack of a stack of paper or PDF for them to scroll through and either print out and sign. So we have to get rid of paper as much as we can, and that's going to happen. Uh, it's just going to automate so much for employers. Uh, the other thing is behind the scenes is the taxes. So one of the major challenges, especially after COVID, employees are working all over the country, all over the world, right? They're And what that causes for an employer, that employer, when they hire an employee in California or Louisiana, they have to file a state tax ID on employment and withholding. They have to register in each one of those states. And if the employer doesn't have somebody on top of this, in-house and or working with an outside vendor, it gets really, 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 really messy. So I believe that process is going to be streamlined and improved in the near future. The other thing of actually paying taxes, right? Identifying where your employees are located, working, and residing. Uh, that whole function, the payroll company actually pays taxes on behalf of the employer. I think that's going to be streamlined. There's a lot of manual work behind the scenes that the payroll company still has to do, filing quarterly tax returns and local, like Pennsylvania is a local, has locals, Ohio has locals. So I think that process is going to improve.
Whether they're trying to start a payroll HR company or just any other business, your entrepreneurial advice, what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who are just starting out?
Good question. So I think first and foremost, I would say if you are going to be scaling, if you're going to be bringing on, if you're going to get beyond 10 employees, 15 employees. So that would be my first question is like, how is it going to be you and just an administrative assistant? Like, how big is the company potentially going to be in the next 6, 9, 12, 18 months? And if it's going to scale beyond 10 employees, like it gets a little bit more complicated. You have to outsource your payroll. It's negligible cost. And you have to make sure that you understand when you hire employees in California or in New York or in New Jersey or in some of these states that have statutory insurance, mandated insurance, and paid family leave, that you just understand that and you're aware of it and you do the proper filings. So I'm talking more of administrative advice. I'm not talking about sort of entrepreneurial advice of how to build your company. It just continues. If you have a mistake, you miss it, it just continues to sort of bite you. The other thing I would say is explore a PEO. It's a professional employer organization. It's very easy, turnkey. If you're between 10 and 35, even up to 50 employees, and you're growing pretty fast and you need to offer benefits, you need to offer an enterprise type of environment for employees that you're recruiting away from larger organizations, set up a PEO. There's many of them out there. Make sure it's a certified professional employer organization, and that could be a temporary stop. But understand when you go into the PEO, also have an exit plan. So we put companies on PEOs, but the first thing we talk about is, okay, when do you think you're going to come out? Right? Like, yeah, it's very sticky. You get locked in, and a lot of employers just stay there forever. And there is a time when they should and need to come out of the PEO because they can save significantly. They've kind of outgrown it. But yeah, go in. Like a lot of private equity, a lot of these companies that are being funded with a massive amount of money, they're like, go on a PEO. Just get set up on a PEO. They'll handle everything. Get your foundation in place. They'll handle your handbook. They'll make sure you're compliant against along all the state, you know, with all your employees across the country. You're not going to have to worry about registering every state unless it's a self-reporting state. The other thing I would say is make sure you have a spreadsheet of every state tax ID you have. So your federal tax ID number and every state that your employees are in. Make sure if it's a state that has a withholding and an unemployment, make sure you have an itemized accounting of every state tax ID you have. Because if you want to make a system change, that's the first thing that you're going to have to give the new vendor. Where are all your employees and what state tax IDs do you have?
All right, changing gears a little bit. Talking about company culture, how do you create a positive and supportive company culture at Payroll Mart, and what role does it play in the company's success, in your opinion?
As I mentioned, I don't like following rules, right? So, and when people tell me to do stuff, I kind of figure out, another way to do it. So, not all of my employees are wired that way. So, I understand, and a lot of them want more sort of processes and systems and guidance and support. And they want to be, many of them want to be told what to do. They want to work off a checklist. So it's sort of like a Myers Briggs, but it's Kolbe, Kolbe. So that's what I use to understand sort of the cognitive makeup of the employees. So when I'm speaking to them, I understand that they're not me. They're not wired like me. And I just try to be real, right? In the situation. I try to meet them where they're at and establish processes as much as I possibly can, because that's not my strength, but to give them as much support as possible to make sure that they can succeed. So it's a relaxed culture, uh, but in another sense, I do. One of our top priorities is availability and service to our clients. Our so it's a balance, right? So like I want to meet our employees where they are, but I also want to make sure they understand that our clients are very, very important. And we need to meet our clients where they are and 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 make sure we're paying attention to them, getting back to them in a timely manner. If we don't know the answer, we tell them we don't know the answer, but we're working as hard as possible to get the answer and or resolve the issue.
Funny you mentioned balance, because I'm always talking to entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs are always busy. How do you maintain a healthy work-life balance and prioritize your well-being? I mean, you mentioned your wife is a pharmaceutical. Anybody I know that's in pharmaceuticals, if she's still doing that,
She
there's a lot of
travels.
work to do there.
We have family, child, dog, yep, kids, uh yeah, busy social life, sports, all that stuff. I get up early. I ran the dog. This morning I was up at 5:30 and got my exercise in, and the dog got exercised, and was at my 8 a.m. Drove my daughter to school, and then had my 8 a.m. breakfast that I have every Friday with a fellow entrepreneur, which I love that time. I don't consider that work, right? I do try to create some buffer days for myself. So Fridays and Mondays are I try not to do a lot of email. I do a lot of thinking, audiobooks, more time for myself, thinking about the business, creative projects. I like to be or try to get into a state of flow as much as I possibly can, which is really, really, really hard. And, recognizing the administrative stuff that kind of sucks the life out of me, versus stuff that I get I get adrenaline and I can get excited about. So my Friday morning breakfasts I get excited about. I'm in a peer-to-peer CEO group that we meet, once a month. Every Thursday, I get, seeing, the range of experience and age and revenue in our group is amazing, and everyone deals with the same issues. Everyone deals with work-life balance and how do they find more time, or now that they have more time, they might be older and not as fit as they used to be. So one of my priorities is to get exercise pretty much every day in some form or fashion. So whether it's mountain biking or running or walking with my wife and running with my kids, swimming, yeah, anything I can do. If I can do 30 minutes to an hour, that's one of my top priorities.
You describe the community where you live, and I would imagine success when you're in a community like that depends on some level of community involvement. What are your thoughts on giving back to your community, and how does Payroll Mart contribute to, I don't know, social, environmental, community causes?
This coming up in a couple weeks, there's a Brave the Shave event, which is a St. Baldrick's foundation for cancer. Good close friends of ours lost their daughter 3 year. She was 3 years old, and this was many years ago. But they're very involved, so it's a foundation that they support. We support it as well, and each year there are a couple people that brave the shave. They decide to shave their head, and it's a like a half day event. You go there and each person goes up and they get their head shaved in front of. So we contribute, we volunteer. My daughters volunteer. We donate money. My wife helps set up. So that's a big event for us. I did have a Go Daddy Go race that I created, a 5K race. It's no longer going on, but we did it for many years, and it was to help. It was an HCM foundation, which helps families that are dealing with cancer. So with transportation to back and forth to the hospital, like all the day to day kind of logistical stuff that is hard to manage and achieve, mowing the lawn. And so the money that we raised with that foundation, we wanted to make it practical in the sense that we just didn't want to be asking for donations from people. We actually wanted to operate it as like a business where we put on races, running races, endurance races. All that money that came in directly went into the foundation, and then it directly went to the families to help their situations.
What are the long-term goals for Payroll Mart, and where do you see your company heading in the future?
Yeah, long-term goals are to have more brokers, bigger broker distribution. That's my number one goal in 2024, heading into 2025. So getting the message out there, because more brokers we have aware of us, each of them have 3, 4, 5, 1,000 clients. So growing grassroots, I would say acquiring, looking at other possible companies to acquire is a major goal. Acquisition would be very much on my radar. Rolling up some other entities, and then yeah, I would say just that building our broker distribution. Oh, the third is launching our shuttle product. So technology, further technology development, our own proprietary technology development that falls in line with supporting our brokers and our existing employer clients.
Well, let's say somebody is listening or watching, because we're both, right? We're on audio and video. What if somebody wants to get in touch with you? What if they want to inquire about selling you their HR company, or they want to inquire about having you do their payroll, or they want to talk to you about shaving their head? What's the best way to get with you?
I would say LinkedIn. So message me on LinkedIn or email me, paul@payrollmart.com.
Is payrollmart.com your website?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Well, this has been great. I learned a little bit of stuff. This has been a great conversation. I'm glad you reached out.
Yeah.
I will say for you and for anyone listening or watching, if you're going to grow, chances are strong that you're going to have to do something inappropriate.